Hello, welcome back to my podcast. My name is Justina, and at the very beginning, I just wanted to apologize for my voice because I'm a little bit sick and I might sound a little bit different than usual. But today, I want to talk about motivation and why so many people feel like they've lost it. Not just motivation for big dreams, but motivation for everyday life. And if you've ever thought, why can't I just push myself like I used to? I want to say this very clearly. Motivation isn't disappearing because you're lazy, it's disappearing because your system is overloaded. And when I was in college, I often felt unmotivated, and it took me a while to realize why it happens. My ambitions plans were not always the best idea, but I really wanted to reach my goals. But unfortunately, it wasn't always possible. We've been taught that motivation is about willpower, about discipline, about forcing yourself to keep going. But the body doesn't work like that. So let's start by defining motivation. What do you think motivation is? Just answer that question to yourself. I'm going to give you the answer. Motivation is a state, not a personality trait. It's your mind and body saying, I have enough energy, safety, and clarity to move. Motivation appears when three things are present: safety, clarity, and meaning. When one of them is missing, motivation drops. Not as punishment, but as perfection. And think of a situation when you thought you have motivation to do something, but you clearly felt overwhelmed and you decided to do too many things at a time, or let's say your goal was just too big and you lost motivation because it all seemed like a very big goal. So your motivation dropped instantly because in your mind you felt like you're not going to reach your goal anyway. So let's talk about your nervous system. So your nervous system is your body's alarm and safety system. Its job is to constantly ask, am I safe right now? When the answer is no, because of stress, overwhelm, or emotional pressure, your body shifts into survival mode. And in survival mode, growth is not priority. And like I mentioned before, college was seriously testing me when it comes to motivation. I was extremely tired, and sometimes I had no energy to do anything. My motivation dropped every time I looked at my to do list, and my nervous system was constantly overstimulated, and my body ended up in a survival mode. So, what is survival mode? Survival mode is a state where your body focuses on getting through the day, avoiding danger, or conserving energy. In this state, motivation often shows up as procrastination, avoidance, numbness, or exhaustion. So, when motivation disappears, it doesn't mean you don't care. It means your nervous system is trying to protect you. So, let's talk about why motivation disappears. So, number one reason is chronic pressure and self monitoring. So, chronic pressure is a long term, low level stress that never fully turns off. It comes from constantly thinking, am I doing enough? Am I behind? Am I wasting time? Your body reads this as a threat, and motivation doesn't grow under threat. It's very hard to stay motivated when you are being pressured to do something. Have been trying to get my driving license for the past few years now, but my old workplace put pressure on having driving license, and that made me feel extremely anxious and unmotivated. And every time I started my lessons, I basically wasn't able to finish them because I was extremely scared of failing. On having a driving license in Ireland is actually a big thing because unfortunately public transport is very bad in here. So almost everyone has a car. So let's talk a little bit about dopamine. I'm sure you all heard that word all over social media. Um, if you don't know what dopamine is a brain chemical connected to motivation, anticipation, and drive. It's released when we feel excited about what's coming next. So, for example, when you're scrolling through TikTok, your dopamine is released in your brain. But what is a dopamine burnout? And that happens when your brain is constantly stimulated, constantly scrolling, and constantly chasing the next thing, but never deeply satisfied. This often leads to low motivation, lack of drive, and feeling bored or stuck. I will probably give you a lot of examples from the time I worked in my old workplace because at that time my motivation was very low. I had no energy to do anything, and I felt extremely overstimulated with everything that was happening around me. I found it very hard to step back and somehow deal with all the stuff that were happening, and I ended up with like a very bad anxiety. So there is this thing called emotional exhaustion. You're being tired on the inside and not just in your body. It comes from carrying uncertainty, self doubt, unprocessed disappointment, or constant emotional regulation. You can rest physically and still feel unmotivated because emotional weight hasn't been released. And I'm sure everyone can remember the pandemic when we all felt uncertain. At that time, I really wanted to proceed with my career and find my dream job. And I constantly felt very uncertain and disappointed. And that led me to extreme emotional exhaustion. I remember having panic attacks multiple times a day, because at that time I had zero knowledge of emotional regulation and what constant pressure can do to your body. The next thing I really want to talk about is outgrowing your goals. So, outgrow your goals means the goal made sense for an older version of you, but not for who you are right now. Loss of motivation here isn't failure, it's a feedback. And again, going back to my old job, when I was younger, my dream was to work for a big company and to do all those big important things like you see in reality shows and Netflix shows, for example. And I got a taste of that in my old job. I wasn't anyone important and I had very little to say, but there were times when I had to make decisions. And I quickly realized that this is not what I want to do anymore, and it was very hard for me to stay there and keep doing that. So I decided to start learning about the things I'm currently interested in. And that really helped me a lot. So I really recommend doing that. So let's talk about why pushing harder backfires. And I just want to define something very important. I want to talk about forcing yourself. So, forcing yourself is acting against your capacity instead of working with it. When you force yourself repeatedly, your body associates effort with pain and motivation becomes unsafe. So, next time your system resists sooner, this isn't laziness, it's conditioning. And I often pushed myself harder when I was in college, especially during like exam seasons, and I usually ended up extremely exhausted, and my grades were very average because I was so tired and my brain was basically switching off. And also, I remember the times when I was doing my dissertation, I would leave everything till the last minute, and I was just force myself to do things when I felt tired or when I just had like zero interest of doing that. And to be honest, it felt like a punishment, and I want you to remember that motivation responds to safety and not punishment. So let's talk about healthy motivation. So, sustainable motivation. What is sustainable motivation? It's a motivation that doesn't rely on fear, doesn't require burnout, and pause and return. It grows through self trust. And self trust is knowing that you won't abandon yourself. You'll listen when you need rest. And you'll come back without shame. So each time you stop before burnout and adjust instead of quitting, you build trust. And trust fuels motivation. So there is something called identity based motivation. And it means that you act from who you believe you are, not from the pressure. So instead of I need to be motivated, it comes I'm someone who returns, or I'm someone who moves gently but consistently. This type of motivation lasts longer and is more effective. So going back to my college times, I shouldn't be telling myself that I need to pass the exam or I need to get like 90%, let's say, in my exam. I should tell myself that I should do my very best. And if I fail, I can always repeat the exam. I can go back, learn what I didn't know at that time, and redo the exam. So I wish I had that knowledge back then, and it would actually make my life a lot easier. So it's extremely important to start small, and it means that you should choose actions that feel doable, non threatening, or easy to return to. You have to remember that small wins rebuild confidence. I'm sure many people started New Year with like New Year, New Me. And I have a video on my channel when I talk about, you know, goal setting and New Year, New Me phrase. But I feel like many people don't realize that you have to start with small steps. I often tell myself that if I want to reach a big goal, I need to find a way to start with small steps. So, for example, if my goal is to have, I don't know, nicer body for the summer, I need to like change my habits, but do it like very slowly. So maybe eat like more vegetables, or like at least one vegetable a day. So that means I have to, let's say, go for walks every day. It doesn't have to be like a long walk. It can be like 10 minutes, 20 minutes. Anything counts. It's better to do 10-minute walk than just don't do anything. And for example, after a week or two, I would maybe try to go for walks like for maybe like half an hour walks or like 40 minutes, 40-minute walk. I would start increasing the length of my walks like every week or every 2 weeks, and that way I would end up with like going for like, let's say, an hour or an hour and a half, and that's how you will end up reaching your bigger goal with the smaller steps. So it's also very important to remember that there's such a thing called working in seasons. And it means accepting that energy fluctuates, motivation isn't linear, and rest is the part of progress. Consistency is about returning, not about stopping. So, going back to my last example, I feel like there's a lot of people who start exercising and think that they have to go to the gym like every single day without rest days, or they have to go for like runs every day for like 2 hours. They shouldn't have a break, but your body needs rest in order to move forward. Your body can't keep going with like high energy without a break. So if you're constantly working too much and if you're constantly put pressure on yourself, that will only lead to a burnout because your body will not be able to keep going like that for a long time. So you have to remember to rest. And if you feel like you need to stop, just stop, take a step back, and come back to it the next day. So I always make sure that I'm well rested before I sit down to do anything. I try not to do too much, and if my body tells me to take a break or skip a day, I will do it, but I will make sure that the next day I am ready to do the same thing and that I'm returning with new energy, and usually I have more motivation than the day before. Another very important thing is to stop while the task still feels okay. This teaches your body doing this doesn't drain me, and that makes returning a lot easier. So sometimes I like to tell myself that I will do, let's say, Spanish for an hour, and I will stick to it even if I feel like I could do more. And this way, I make sure not to overwork myself and always stay motivated. So, as usual, I have some journal questions for you. So, open your journals and write them down, and you can answer them whenever you can. I always say that, I know. um, so, let's just dig in with the questions. So, my first question is, what shuts my motivation down fastest? The second question is, where am I forcing myself instead of listening? And the last question is, what helps it come back naturally? And of course, I have daily actions and a little affirmation. For your daily action, I want you to choose one task this week and make it smaller, make it lighter, or stop before resentment. And for affirmation, I want you to write this down. I don't need to punish myself to move forward. Motivation grows when I feel safe. If motivation has been hard lately, it doesn't mean you're failing. It means your system is asking for understanding. Motivation isn't something you force, it's something you create the condition for. And when you treat yourself like a human, motivation meets you there. Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you know anyone who might need this sort of information, feel free to share this episode with them. If you like this episode, please subscribe to my channel and comment down below what you think about this episode, and don't forget to leave thumbs up. Also, you can find me on Instagram at positive.mindset.adventures, and I'll see you in my next episode. Thank you. See you. Bye.